Call me an optimist, but I feel like TikTok has actually kept the message of underconsumption core. If I had to pick the most influential trend of TikTok last year, I think I would pick underconsumption core. Not only because it had the app in an absolute chokehold for most of last summer, but because it was a trend that confronted our consumptive habits on a platform that is literally designed to get us to buy as much as possible. For a while, it felt like the entire internet was talking about underconsumption core, and then it kind of vanished. Brat summer took over, and then we went into full fashion, and we kind of got back into that routine of constantly pushing new clothes and talking about what's trending. But despite the fact that the underconsumption core hashtag might have died off, I don't think the sentiment of us needing to buy less has completely disappeared. I think it's been rebranded. Recent trends, and certainly a lot of people's attitude towards the start of the new year, have kind of shown me that this aversion towards overconsumption has lasted longer than we might think. And I kind of want to dive into that in this video and analyze what that means. So let's get into it. Before we do, welcome back to my channel. I know a lot of you are new here, so hi, my name's Katie. I talk about fashion, sustainability, consumption online, and personal style, and try to make interesting videos about all of those topics. So if that sounds good to you, then subscribe to me here on YouTube and follow me on all my other social media. And with that, let's get into it. So like I mentioned, I feel like underconsumption core is still living on in our online discourse. I just feel like it's been rebranded, or has at least influenced the rise of similar topics and trends online, and potentially made them a bit more mainstream. For example, no-buys have been around for a while, but I feel like they have exploded in popularity recently. You've also had a lot of people joining boycotts of major brands, as well as specific trends like projectpan becoming mainstream, or people addressing their fast fashion consumption and intentions to cut down in their New Year's ins and out lists. Obviously, these individual examples might not mean much alone, but collectively, I feel like they add up to a bigger shift in consumer sentiment. But before I get into that, let's break down some of the examples I gave. Like I said, no-buys are not really new. They've been around for a while now. But I think traditionally, they've been marketed as a way for people to cut consumption for ethical reasons. And whilst I still think that's a big reason for the explosion of people trying this in 2025, I think a major reason why they've exploded recently is the cost of living crisis is prompting people to use them for financial reasons too. And this is encouraging people to look deeper into their finances and break down their costs to see exactly what they're spending their money on, which in turn I think is surprising them when they realize exactly how much money they might be spending on things like fashion and beauty. Another example is projectpan, which I think has existed for a little while on YouTube, but has definitely been taken over by TikTok and adopted there. I think to me, this is the clearest rebrand of underconsumption core that I've personally seen. And I think it's really interesting that it's targeting the beauty industry, which has a lot of issues with waste and overconsumption, but isn't really talked about. Although this is, as I said, very focused on beauty products, it definitely still echoes the messages of underconsumption core in using what you have and confronting how overconsumption has been so normalized in our society. Researching for this trend, I genuinely was so surprised at how many people were participating and showing their hoards of beauty products. I did not think that overconsumption of beauty was so prevalent among regular people that weren't influencers. And I think part of that is the fact that we're no longer able to tell what is overconsumption and what isn't, thanks to the rise of influencer marketing, TikTok videos, and of course other social media platforms just constantly telling us that we need to buy. Another example I can think of is the recent Emma Chamberlain video, which I think actually had quite a lot of impact online. If you don't know what I'm talking about, then basically Emma culled her closet and donated a lot of clothes to charity and basically whittled it down into a capsule wardrobe that fit her personal style. And I think it sparked a lot of discussion. I think it fit very well into the recent trends we've seen online towards personal style, towards cutting back on consumption. So let's talk about why the essence of underconsumption core has managed to stay on, despite the fact that TikTok trends normally last 2 weeks at most. I think this ongoing and fluctuating resurgence of people questioning their buying habits can definitely be linked to ongoing factors like economic and political instability, and maybe also the rise of people weaponizing their money by withholding their purchases to companies that don't fit their ethical values. I think you can also pinpoint it on very specific events like Netflix's Buy Now documentary that I have seen mentioned a lot across all of these underconsumptioncore variants. On my part, I think a big reason that maybe isn't so obvious is the fact that our social media has been focused on consumption as a macro trend for so long. And if we know anything about society, it's that it likes to swing from one extreme to the other. I think the fact that for so long there's been a pervasive belief that consumption equals happiness, at least online, means that we're definitely due for that pendulum to swing back. I've definitely seen a changing online sentiment away from happiness being things and instead happiness being leisure time and being offline and doing things instead of just sitting on our phones buying the latest item. Or in other words, I think it's leading to a decline in the consumption economy and a rise in the experience economy. You also have to look at what the macro trends for fashion have been for the past few years as well, and what that means when the pendulum swings. We've already started to see a rejection of the TikTok trend and the micro trend culture, which has dominated our screens since maybe 2020 or even before, and the rise in things that could be considered the exact opposite, like extreme individualism over conformity and being loud and bold over quiet and clean. According to trend predictors like Pinterest and Vogue, that pendulum has already started to swing, and we're seeing a rise in searches of vintage maximalism and chaotic customization, which definitely lend into this overarching theme of personal style. I think if I had to pick my second biggest trend on TikTok from last year, it would be personal style. And despite the fact that some people are saying that the interest in personal style is going to drop off in 2025, I think it's only going to grow as part of this pendulum swing. I think the narrative of personal style and the experience economy trending together definitely makes sense, considering the fact that online discourse right now is very much centered towards, in order to have personal style, you need to be interested in things outside of fashion, you need to be interested in things outside of TikTok, you need to be experiencing events and cultivating your hobbies and doing things with your friends and dressing for the life you actually have. I want to talk about what this means for the fashion industry and how they're reacting to this consumer trend, because they are reacting. The thing about TikTok trends is you can dismiss them as being very fleeting or indicative of only a small percentage of consumers. But fashion brands aren't seeing it this way when it comes to the shift towards underconsumption. A recent study looking at fashion's priorities for 2025 by Business of Fashion reported that consumer appetite to spend is the top issue CEOs are worried about this year. There's definitely a sense of worry towards profits and consumer interest in spending that have spanned the last year or two and don't look like they're going away. The same report highlights the fact that although fashion is worried consumers don't want to spend, they're not diving deep enough into the reasons that might be, drawing the same conclusions I've outlined in this video about the trend towards underconsumption and the increased interest in sustainability. For example, stats from the same report suggest that CEOs think that volume, not price, will drive growth in 2025. Their plan to remain above the red is to shove more things in our face, despite the fact that so many of us are contemplating why we need so much in the first place. To be honest, I'm not really surprised that this is the case. Whilst I do think that some brands will lean into and try to monetize this trend towards underconsumption with things like customization services and upcycling services that will further the personal style trend, I think too a lot of brands continuing to drag their heels and push more and more stuff on us, it doesn't make sense to pay attention to these trends, especially when you rely on the attitude behavior gap rather than TikTok. Although you can't deny that consumer sentiment is definitely trending towards being more interested in sustainability, the numbers do show that we don't tend to put our money where our mouth is when it comes to purchases. This is maybe most easily shown by the fact that the Netflix documentary Buy Now that so many of us watched came out around Black Friday, and it has since remained in the conversation even up till now. And yet, Barclaycard reported an almost 10% increase in UK consumers spending during Black Friday compared to the year before. If you had listened to the social media sentiment rather than those figures, you might have thought that spending had gone down, but clearly this wasn't the case. Another interesting example of this is consumers' sentiments towards influencers. influencers. Many people claim that they don't trust influencers and champion movements like de-influencing, but platforms like Like2Know, which allow influencers to show their followers exactly where they bought something and get an affiliate commission every time they purchase, attracts 40 million monthly viewers to its site and generated $5 billion in sales last year. The influencer economy as a whole was valued at $24 billion. Clearly, a lot of us still trust influencers and are shopping from their recommendations. And I think part of the reason for this is influencers' ability to jump on trends like underconsumptioncore or like projectpan, which seem anti-consumeristic in nature, and twist it to still sell us stuff. Like a TikTok I saw joining in the projectpan trend, which was rating product empties and whether they're worth it or not, which is literally just a rebrand of another popular trend from a while ago, which is, if I had to restart my makeup brand, this is what I buy again. It's just consumerism in disguise. I think, to summarize, my thoughts are that underconsumptioncore is not going away and is instead going to become a macro trend that influences a lot of discourse this year and hopefully in the years ahead. But that doesn't always mean our consumptive habits are going to change to reflect this, or that brands are going to be listening to this trend and changing their business models to reflect it. What it does do, however, is create a gateway for people to get more interested in the subject of sustainability, underconsumption, and slow fashion. And hopefully, if that happens and the general sentiment of wanting to buy less continues to prevail, then brands will sort of be forced to listen to us and stop creating so much crap. From a personal point of view, I think my other main takeaway from this, and the reason I found the topic so interesting, is how often we rebrand the same sentiments to be something else so that TikTok finds it new and exciting, and whether that is detrimental or not to promoting good causes like underconsumption. It also kind of fitted into my goal for this year of looking at fashion trends like personal style and fitting them into a wider cultural context. And the conclusions I came to that underconsumptioncore is a macro trend that is hopefully here to stay give me hope. And I hope it also gave you hope too. So thank you so much for watching. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this topic, and I will see you next time. Have a nice day. Bye.